session where we, basically talk at very high level about some different issues, and then go into the feedback session where we have the corridor divided up into 3 separate segments. We'll have the south end on the south end of the building, the central end here, and the north end here. SDOT staff will be at these tables to talk about the corridor, the different issues that we're seeing out there, and get your thoughts and observations on how we can make things better on 35th. And before we get any farther, I just want to say, there's definitely a lot of interesting ideas that are going to come up tonight. So I want everyone to be respectful of one another. I want you to challenge ideas and not people. And I want you to discuss 35th Avenue Southwest. We don't want to, talk about really any other different issues that are going to keep us off track. So let's be respectful of one another's time. How about we get going with a little informal poll too? How many people here, show of hands, use 35th every day? That's a lot of you. How many of you live on 35th? Healthy, excellent. Anyone live within 3 or 4 blocks of 35th? Awesome. How many people think 35th is perfect and we shouldn't do anything to it? Okay, goose egg. And how many people here think 35th needs help? Okay, good. Awesome. So let's dive in. So, how did we get here? Well, I started working for SDOT in 2007, and I can't tell you how many times that I've come out here with my colleagues to meet with people who have experienced a collision in one way, shape, or form or another, as a victim of a crash or as a friend of somebody who was involved in a crash. And unfortunately, there have been way too many crashes and tragedies on this roadway over the years. So early this year, Mayor Murray and Councilmember Rasmussen put together this idea that we could launch a road safety corridor project on 35th to work with the community, to gather your input, and come up with a solution that works for West Seattle. In addition, we really looked at the data, and the data really shows that there are collision issues on 35th. It's a corridor that runs through essentially a neighborhood, and essentially we're having to deal with crashes out in front of people's front yards, essentially. So the goal of this project is to improve safety for everybody: drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, skateboarders, you name it. We want to improve safety for you. We want to make sure that when you step off the curb, you feel like you're going to make it to the other side without having to, run for your life. And we want to create a street that's more forgiving so that when people do make mistakes, which we all do, right, the consequences aren't tragic. We're going to do that by really pouring through the data. We're going to look at where the crashes are occurring and what's causing them. And then we're going to develop engineering, enforcement, and education solutions to address these issues. We'll have a mix of short and long-term engineering improvements with lots of opportunities for public input. And on that public input note, if anyone feels like they're not being heard at these meetings, feel free to send me an email anytime. I'd be happy to come out and walk the corridor with you, or stand at a particular location and observe conditions. Yes, ma'am.
Would you just say your email right now so we can jot it down?
Yeah, sure. It'll be up on the screen at the end of the presentation too, but it's jim.curtin, C-U-R-T-I-N, @seattle.gov. So again, I'm willing to meet with you whenever and wherever. This is my neighborhood, so it's not an inconvenience at all. We intend to start implementing changes next spring or summer, depending on exactly how long the process takes. So what we are starting to work on today will be fully developed and ready to be implemented next summer. The project area, and 35th is a giant corridor, so it's really hard to map. So north is on my side of the big screen over here. But the 35th corridor, and the project area we're looking at is from Avalon Way southwest to Southwest Roxbury Street. We're not going all the way to Fauntleroy because we have another effort underway at the city to address the Fauntleroy area through the Fauntleroy Green Boulevard project. But this is essentially the entire principal arterial corridor of 35th and West Seattle. 35th, the current street design is, of course, as I mentioned, it's principal arterial, 4 to 5 lanes wide. It is generally about 55 feet wide, curb to curb out there. It's served by multiple transit routes, and of course there's on-street parking sporadically, but pretty consistently throughout the corridor. Go ahead, AJ. Thank you. So again, north is at the top of the screen right here. Roxbury is at the south end of the screen. On an average weekday, about 16,500 vehicles use 35th Avenue Southwest when you're down at Southwest Roxbury Street. And those volumes build as you head north, as you might expect, towards the West Seattle Bridge. And by the time you get out to Avalon Way, we've got traffic volumes approaching 25,000 vehicles per day, which we would consider a fairly busy corridor. So what's going on 35th? You guys all know this, but here are some numbers for you. There are 488 parcels that are immediately adjacent to 35th Avenue Southwest. 73% of those are single-family homes. 11% of those are also housing units in the form of apartments or condos or townhouses. And then another 10% are industrial or commercial uses. You know, we have a lot of mechanics and little shops on the corridor as well. There are also 4 churches or religious service organizations that take up shop right adjacent to 35th. There are 3 schools within 2 blocks of the corridor, 2 libraries right on 35th. There are parks and community centers in the very, very close vicinity to the corridor, along with 2 daycares, retirement nursing homes, and medical and dental service centers as well. The speed limit is 35 miles per hour on 35th. I think that has been played with a few times in West Seattle. I think I-35. I-35 is a common nickname for 35th. Our speed studies show that most people are driving at 38.5 miles per hour at West Brandon Street, nearly 41 miles per hour at Southwest Willow, and 36.5 north of Roxbury. Now, I will say that these speeds have come down considerably since 2007. This was mainly due to a lot of work that has been done by SDOT and by the Seattle Police Department. 35th was a pilot location for mobile photo enforcement, and that really made a huge difference on the corridor. SPD continues to do a great job enforcing the speed limits, especially out in front of Our Lady of Guadalupe, 35th and Myrtle, the school zone in that area. You see them out there all the time. But we've also installed some radar speed signs and made some tweaks here and there to bring down speeds. However, we still have a couple of locations where people are exceeding the speed limit by 5+ miles per hour. And remember that these are the 85th percentile speeds. That means 85% of people are going 41 miles per hour at Willow or less. That means 15% of the traffic volume is going 41 or faster. And 15% on a roadway that carries nearly about 20,000 vehicles per day is quite a bit. Yes, sir?
With your speed study, so when you turn averages right now, do you include it in the SAR in terms of higher lows? So in terms of likelihood of somebody going 10 miles an hour versus likelihood of somebody going 5 or 6 miles an hour?
Yeah, we definitely have that. It's all broken out. Sometimes it's hard to say. We usually have speed studies where 1 or 2 people are going 50 or 60 miles per hour, but that could be emergency response vehicles. It's really kind of hard to judge who exactly is speeding. But we have all that information. We'd be happy to provide it for you. Yes, sir?
Jim, you said these have come down.
Yes.
When were these taken?
These speed studies here were taken within the last year. So these are very recent speed studies.
So when did they come down? I guess that's what I'm confused about.
So in about 2007 or 2008, we started doing some different things out there. The mobile photo enforcement, radar speed signs, that's when we started to see a difference out here.
Okay, so they were hired for this at one time.
The 85th
Making progress coming down.
Exactly.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 85th percentile speed when I started at SDOT on 35th Avenue was above 42 miles per hour. So we have done better,
Yeah.
but there's still room for improvement.
Sure.
So collisions. So I have these maps printed out over here on a table. These are also available on our website, but I think these maps give you a really good snapshot of what's going on the corridor. As you can see on the map to the right, this is just Morgan to Roxbury here. And basically, every location where there could be a collision, there has been one. I think that's pretty fair to say. In the last 3.5 years or so, there have been a total of 294 crashes on 35th, 128 injuries, and 2 fatalities. In the last 10 years, there have been more than 1,000 crashes, 412 injuries, and 5 fatalities. I think we can do a lot better than this right here. And I think it's pretty interesting to note that the injury rate is pretty consistent in the 3-year study and in the 10-year study. Approximately 40% of the collisions result in injuries. It's pretty significant. The citywide average is more about 25%. So we're seeing a lot of crashes that result in people, breaking bones or worse. Yes, young lady?
Is that just Morgan to Roxbury?
Yes, that's just Morgan to Roxbury. No. No, the image is just Morgan to Roxbury. The stats are for the whole corridor. I've got both maps over here so you can see that. Sir in the back?
Do the fatalities include the bicyclists?
In the last 10 years, yes, that does include the bicyclists. We had 1 bicyclist killed at Southwest Graham Street. We had a motorcyclist killed at Southwest Juneau. And then we've had 3 pedestrians killed on the corridor at various locations. Yes, sir.
So does that work out to about an accident every 3 days or so?
It's about right, yeah.
And how does that rank against the other big arterials in the city?
Well, I think it's fairly common for those numbers to show up. I mean, I think you'd see more on roadways like Aurora Avenue North, but that's just because the volumes are so high. So the collision rate, I think we would probably need to work out, but I think it's about average for this.
Pretty consistent.
Pretty consistent, yeah.
Okay.
So let's talk again about vulnerable users. We talked a lot about what's going on 35th. We've got parks, we've got schools, we've got libraries, we've got transit service. People need to get across the street to get to the bus stop, right? So those people are not driving to one side of the street and parking their car and hopping the bus. They're walking across the street. And in the last 3 years, we've had 15 pedestrian vehicle collisions, 1 bicycle vehicle collision. And in the last 10 years, we've had 40 pedestrians hit on 35th Avenue Southwest. 40 pedestrians. And when we're talking about vehicular traffic going, between 35 and 40 miles per hour, in my opinion, that's really rolling the dice because pedestrians do not typically do well when they're hit by a vehicle going that fast. So we've been, I wouldn't say we've been lucky. I think we have room for improvement is what I would say. 8 bicycle vehicle collisions have occurred on the corridor in the last 10 years. And again, 4 out of the 5 fatalities were either pedestrians or bicyclists. So people who are getting around on, they're using their own power, essentially. Ready? So we're going to break on to the feedback session portion of the evening in just a second here. But we want to talk about some of the contributing factors, some of the behavioral issues that we're seeing out on 35th Avenue Southwest. Distracted driving is the top contributing factor of collisions on this roadway. And that's about 30% of the crashes are caused by people who are not paying attention to the road, essentially.
Jim, can I ask you a quick question? Because you're saying this roadway, how is this different from any other roadway within Seattle? I guess that's what I'm curious about.
Well, there are different contributing factors
Okay.
for every different collision, and you know, factors changed by the design of the street, the nature of the roadway.
Because I hear distracted driving everywhere.
Yes.
In the United States, just about, not our own little 35th Avenue Southwest. And I'm not trying to denigrate it or say anything good or bad about it. It's just something I hear quite a bit.
I don't think there's really anything good to say about distracted driving. I mean, when you're behind the wheel of a 2,000 plus pound instrument,
Exactly.
you know, it's in your best interest to make sure you're focusing on the road.
Absolutely.
I just want to note that like those smaller cars are actually more like 3,500 pounds. 2,000 pounds is like a Lotus.
It's a smart car,
Like,
maybe.
yeah, so like a truck, you're thought like a Subaru is like 3,500 pounds. So really quite a bit more than that.
So the physics involved in collision are just downright scary, right? I mean, it's just not a good thing. Sir, did you have a question?
You know, when you're talking about the accidents, are you taking into account the fact that the pedestrians are doing stuff they shouldn't be versus the car? You know, did they walk out there when they shouldn't have? You know, was the car charged in the accident or not? I mean, we can take them all together and make it look like it's all the car's fault when it's lack of responsibility on people on the bikes, the motorcycles, and pedestrians. So, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I think, you know, at the city, we would say that there are no accidents. In fact, accidents are very rare. I think it would be an act of God would be an accident. But whenever there is a crash, there is a good reason why a crash has occurred. And usually it's because of human error. So that's a great point. Now, there are things that we can do as a Department of Transportation and as a city to improve conditions, to provide more structure and reduce some of the behavioral issues that we see out there. So some of the other issues that we are seeing are speeding. I think that is probably a no-brainer to anyone who lives in West Seattle. Impaired driving is a big issue, as it is across the entire city of Seattle. And failure to grant the right-of-way to pedestrians, bicyclists, or other vehicles as well. We're lucky to have Captain Wilske with us tonight. He's going to talk a little bit about what we've done on the corridor and what we're thinking about doing. So, Captain Wilske?
For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Steve Wilske. I'm the captain with the Southwest Precinct. I've been there for just about a year. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll speak up a little bit. I've been there for about a year now. In May, actually, pull my glasses on so I can actually see, but in May, Jim and I actually started talking in May in regards to some of the concerns that folks had in regards to the 35th Avenue corridor. And so we were together, we were able to kind of work together and actually develop a plan in May that we started in June. And for 4 months, June to the end of September, we were able to actually place officers in their target area. They're on 35th. That were focused on traffic enforcement. And these are patrol officers that work out of the Southwest Precinct. And exactly like it says up there, I don't like throwing a lot of numbers around, but in that 4-month period, we made over 200 contacts with drivers. And the number one thing, as most people can probably attest to if you drive around, 70 of those contacts for people driving or talking on a cell phone while they're driving. So it very much validates the data that says the number one cause is distracted driving. People talking on their cell phone. We actually stopped a couple of people who had their phone up in front of them that were texting. The second number that we actually looked at is speed as well. So we actually, 40 of the contacts that we made were actually for speed. So between those two, 110 of the 200 contacts we made were for exactly the issues that you folks thought about, which were distracted driving and speed. The remainder were different rules of the road violations, following too closely, failure to right away to the pedestrians. But again, what you folks had seen and what Jim's data was validated by our 4-month emphasis, because the vast majority were distracted driving and people driving too fast. So we've actually finished the emphasis there, although we're talking about we may start it back up again. And I've got a number of different neighborhood groups that I talk to on a pretty regular basis. We're looking to actually expand this emphasis out to some problem areas that the neighborhoods have along Delridge and others. So we're looking for different areas that we can do the same thing. So that's our hope.
Thanks, Captain Wilske. I really appreciate that. Yeah, as Captain Wilske mentioned, you know, we do get grant dollars. This supports overtime enforcement patrols for SPD. This allows supplemental actions on the corridor. We also work with SPD's traffic enforcement unit, which is based out of downtown, to do other things. They're the ones who are deploying the mobile van to the Our Lady of Guadalupe school zone out there. And boy, that has really affected behaviors in a positive way out there, I would say. I use the corridor every day, and I actually see the majority of people, you know, slowing down through the school zones. It's a beautiful thing. But without a doubt, I think there's more that we could do, which is why we're here tonight. So let's describe the process really quickly before we jump into our feedback session. I want to make sure we have at least an hour so we can talk to each and every single one of you about 35th. So tonight, meeting number 1. Next Tuesday is meeting number 2. It will essentially be a carbon copy of this meeting with a few tweaks here and there. But we'll be at the Southwest Library right on 35th Avenue Southwest at Southwest Henderson Street from 3:30 to 5 p.m. to talk to more people. From November through January, we'll continue doing outreach. Like I said, I really want to meet and talk with as many of you as possible about what you think about 35th Avenue Southwest. We want to talk to business owners too. We want to get their take on what's happening out there and what they think could make things better. And during that time, we're also going to develop some conceptual design alternatives for 35th. We'll take those design alternatives back to you in February of next year. So tonight, we're not jumping into solutions by any means at all. We're going to talk about the issues, and we're going to develop those solutions over the next few months. So in early 2015, we'll bring those back out to you, where we'll talk about it again. We'll talk about why we are proposing certain things and how that will improve safety. Then in March or April, we'll have one final meeting where we basically finalize our plans and really set the stage for changes to come to 35th Avenue Southwest. And then, like I said earlier, in the summer, we'll start actually making significant improvements. So tonight is a feedback session. So we basically want to share data with you. We want to hear about your experiences on the corridor. We want you to tell us what would make 35th better for you. So here are some things to think about. Parking. We may have to make some difficult choices about parking. How important is parking to you on 35th Avenue Southwest? Channelization. Could we make changes to the way that the road is striped to reduce speeds, to improve pedestrian safety? I think it's a tool we definitely need to discuss. Bicycle facilities. Our bicycle master plan calls for protected bike lanes on 35th Avenue Southwest. And in 2015, our SDOT will be studying a neighborhood greenway on 34th Avenue Southwest. Where do you want to see bike facilities in the near future? We'll talk about crosswalks and sidewalks and where it's challenging to cross the streets and where you need more help. Traffic signals and where can we look at getting in some protected turn phases or improved turning movements throughout the corridor, because as you'll see in our data, left turns are a big problem on 35th. We'll talk about access to transit, pavement conditions, traffic calming, and enforcement efforts as well. And with that, I think we'll go into a general question and answer before we break out to a Q&A. Yes?
So help me on your list back there, because honestly, when I hear that impairment and distracted driving are the two top causes, I'm going down those going, well, that's probably that ought to be a priority input. Which of those addresses that?
Well, I would say that all of these address those issues in one way, shape, or form or another. Pardon me?
Impairment?
Well, impairment clearly is a huge issue. It's a choice that people make.
I understand that, we can redesign the street, and I'm glad you're here, I'm not complaining about that. It's just like, is there any of those that help the distracted driving? Those are all behaviors. None of these seem to address behaviors. Why isn't one of our choices a behavior
That's why we have SPD here tonight.
Well, I would expect that the enforcement, like I said, for us, we made 70 stops for distracted driving. So, I mean, to me, that's gonna be the key way to impair or change that behavior. Yes, sir.
But how is doing a bunch of these potential things up here going to change what's going on inside the car? It's the driver behind the wheel or the person walking across the street. This isn't going to make that big a change.
I think you'd be surprised, actually. So the way that roads are designed and the way that we are, basically implement different improvements, I'm looking for a better word that's very, very government, but the way that we implement changes and the way that we design our streets have a huge impact on the way that people behave on our streets. If we have big, wide, open streets, we often have speeding problems. That's because people feel comfortable driving fast when they have more space. So if we have 15-foot wide lanes on a certain street, we should probably just expect that people are going to speed. It's human nature. They're not bad people. That's just the way it works. That's why in Seattle, our neighborhood streets especially are designed to be 25 feet wide, curb to curb, with parking on both sides of the street, so that we have very little opportunity for folks to speed. And they essentially function as a one-way street where you have to take turns. But the way that we organize and provide structure on our streets changes behavior, and it changes it for the better. Yes, sir.
So I'm not making an argument this is necessarily what should be done, but you were mentioning, so people are asking about distracted driving. Like you could make the argument, you mentioned earlier that the left-hand turning is a problem. And so if somebody's trying to turn left on the Juno or Graham or something like that, or left-hand turning, it could be something where it seems like distracted driving could just make an accident happen where there might not have been one had there been a turn, like a center turn. I'm not saying that we should change the roads based on that. I'm just saying that in terms of some of the things you're talking about here, it seems like we can make an argument that potentially could be beyond enforcement.
Well, yes, certainly. I think left turns are a big issue on the corridor. You'll see it. We have data here. We've got it printed on the two maps that are up here. Clearly, left turns are a problem, and I'd be happy to dig down further into the data and tell you how many of those were caused by distracted drivers or how many were not. Because I think what you'll find is that left turns are just an issue and it has nothing to do with distraction at all. Yes, sir?
I live on 35th and I don't want to get bogged down in, just moaning and groaning about anything in particular, but the things that I've noticed, besides the fact that we've lost numerous cars, what I feel bad for is the people who've given their life for this project to go forward, is we have a driveway that's directly off of 35th where a lot of people, they pull out 35th and they go up an alley and they park. And a lot of people don't seem to want, it's like, we feel like we're being chastised for turning into our driveway, even when we're really conscientious about using our blinkers and stuff, because we're not turning at a street, we're turning into a driveway. Some people's sensibilities think, well, what's he stopping traffic to turn into a driveway? Whatever he's doing. We've had people honk at us, we've had people yell at us, all kinds of stuff. And also, buses, they're very necessary, they're very important, but that poor, overburdened roadbed, the buses, when people are heading to work or whatever it is they're doing, they don't like their momentum broke, and they don't like following buses. And every time that bus pulls over, people are jockeying for position to get around that bus. And I've seen more stupid moves happen in front of me or around me for so many years that it just really is amazing.
That's a great point, actually. That is what we do see on roads that have multiple lanes, is people are zigzagging in and out. It's a behavioral issue for sure, but the design of the roadway, again, encourages that. I drive 35th every day. I don't drive it every day, but I use it every day. And when I drive it, I find myself in that same position. If somebody's taking a left-hand turn and I see him, I'm looking to get in the right lane.
You definitely won't be zigzagging with 3 lanes.
Well, hey,
This won't be backed up.
Well, nobody said anything about 3 lanes at this point. There are a lot of different factors to consider.
What is calming, traffic calming?
Reducing speeds on the corridor.
That's all, okay.
A traffic calming tool would be like a radar speed sign.
Good, Okay,
Could you
Chaz?
mention
Yeah.
what the triangle on the back of a bus means to people? It means you must yield to the bus when it's pulling away from the curb. How many people know that? That's a law. You must yield to that bus when he's got his blinkers and pulling. You can't just keep screaming by.
Right.
But they do.
Yep, that's a big issue. Chaz, right?
My question has to do with the timing of the lights. I know a lot of the lights on 35th are smart, and I really appreciate that. Are the lights in any way timed to restrain the speed to 35?
No, we do not. Traffic signals are not used for speed control. They're used to assign right-of-way at intersections. So, I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but it's not something that we legally can do. Yes.
You said greenway possibility on 34th. Could you define what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So a neighborhood greenway is a non-arterial street that's prioritized for pedestrians and bicyclists. Usually there are traffic calming measures on those streets like speed bumps. Stop signs are usually set up so that bicyclists and pedestrians have the right of way, and vehicles have to stop and assess the situation before moving forward. As I mentioned, 34th Avenue Southwest is a location that we will be studying for one of these neighborhood greenways in 2015. 35th, I think, or 34th, we can connect down to the existing greenway, which is on 26th Avenue Southwest, kind of in the western Delridge neighborhood. And it passes a number of great facilities like the Community Center, West Seattle High School, Our Lady of Guadalupe, the current location of West Side School, et cetera, et cetera. And at the arterial streets, we provide more robust crossings so that people are less exposed to traffic when they cross those arterial streets. Yes, sir.
On 35th, the other day, we just went behind the bus and followed it and took pictures, and you can do this on any day, just random. And if you notice the bus in these pictures is always over 9 a lane, it's always covering 2 lanes.
We're not criticizing the bus, it's necessary with these big, huge
Sure,
articulated buses.
sure.
But the lanes, the size of the lanes are ridiculous. I live exactly where you were doing the survey, where you put the rubber hoses out and you count how fast the traffic is. That's in front of my house. And I sat there and measured this. I've been there for 30 years. And you say there's 4 lanes, there's actually 6 lanes. 2 of the lanes are parking and there's 4 for transportation.
Sure.
And if you measure it and you go out there, the amount of sizes for the parking is absurd. It's not even close, it barely covers. And when buses go around parked cars, they pull out the other way in traffic. We used to pull off and park on the curb, and we've been getting tickets ever since for trying to pull off the curb. And when people come and visit, they do it as a reflex, and I've had to pay the tickets for all the people that come and visit me because they see us. And they don't come and see us because you cannot pull off. And it's been like that for so long that if you go down 35th on the north end, it's actually been paved 25 years ago, and people used to pull off on the paved part, and that covers a full block. And they still issue tickets. I paid part in front of mine so you could pull off 2 feet. They still do it. This idea that we're not going to cut 35th down to 3 lanes is absurd. Delroy, Fauntleroy, and California Avenue have all had road diets to take them down to 3 lanes. 1 is center turn lane, 1 north, 1 south, and parking on the side. And it works. And nothing would stop the speed of these people going at ridiculous speeds than somebody in line that doesn't break the speed limit. So everybody has to go. And it is true that people that look at that as Indianapolis 500 to make up for lost speed, trying to get to work because they're 5 minutes late, aren't going to make it. But they have alternative routes. They do not have to go 35th. And to have 35th as the one that's the holdout makes it even worse.
Right.
And the speed, the other thing, in front of my house, I just want to give you something, idea. I personally had 2 cars totaled. Absolutely total. And these were just minor accidents. The speed is so bad that I have pictures of cars that are just total disasters. The police came out one time and they said, we know about it. So they put up a sign that said, photo enforced speed trap. Well, guess what? They didn't photo enforce it, and there used to be a speed radar detector across the street, and they took it down because it was so obvious it was being ignored. Nobody did anything about it. We couldn't keep up. I used to have the cops park in front of my house. I've been there for 30 years. And I told them, you park there and you put out your speed traps and I want you to catch people. And when I catch them across the street, because I'm retired, I see this happen, I give the cops an applause, and I said, you come back here and park in front of my house anytime you want. But they don't do it as often as I wish, and I don't know how with budgetary restraints you can do that. But if you did put 35th on a road diet, you don't need more people to enforce it. The volume of traffic will automatically enforce the speed limit.
Force it, Wood, because you can't do anything.
Well, then why are we doing it?
Take the road out then. And you can keep
It
taking
works on
roads out to the
California,
outskirts.
it works on Conroy, and it also
Make it a
works on
byway.
Conroy. All three of them.
Okay, guys, hey.
Just
We are
slow
not,
everything over.
either we're not doing a road diet, we have not said we're doing a road diet. We have not said that we are not doing a road diet either, okay? So we are here to discuss that. We want to hear your opinion, sir. I mean, that's why we're having this meeting, right? So you bring up a number of very, very valid points about 35th Avenue Southwest. You're on the bus is, straddling 2 lanes. As you'll see on our drawings over here, we have, some pretty narrow lane widths in places out there. Metro would prefer that they were much wider. Certainly if we went through a 3-lane configuration out here, we would have more space for people to park. We would have straight shot road right down the entire corridor, and we can make it work for buses too. I ride the 21. I don't want the 21 to go any slower. Okay, I want it to go faster, and I want it to be reliable. We've done more than 30 road diets in the city of Seattle since the 1970s. There's always, people who say, oh my gosh, it's going to be gloom and doom. It generally doesn't happen. But we have to do our homework before we get to that point. So we do not have a solution for 35th just yet, but we're going to talk about it tonight. Yes, ma'am.
I was almost hit in the same intersection where the pedestrian was recently killed. I think James St. Clair is his name, the one with the, okay. So I was almost hit just a few weeks after he was killed. And it was a driver coming very fast on 35th. It was not a left turn, it was a right turn. I was already out in the intersection crossing, and they feel that they have the right-of-way and to maintain that speed and to not notice that someone is already in the crosswalk and that that's just their right-of-way, that because they're a car, their right-of-way continues in front of them wherever they're going. So what kind of behavioral combined with design features can address that type of problem? That's not the first time something like that's happened.
Well, certainly, I think one of the most misunderstood or just completely unknown rules of the road is that every single intersection is a legal crosswalk, whether there's paint on the ground or not. If you're driving down 35th and someone's stepping off the curb, at 35th and Graham, you're required to stop for them. SDOT's in an interesting situation. We will not mark a crosswalk without a traffic signal on roads like 35th because there are too many lanes of traffic and people basically end up in what's called the multiple threat situation. That's where a vehicle in the inside lane stops for the pedestrian. The person in the middle lane has no idea why that person has stopped, and they just blow through at high speeds, and something bad happens. So our policy is no crosswalks on roads like 35th. Now, we could change things significantly on 35th, which would allow us to get more crossings in out here, which is definitely something we should talk about. Sir? Sorry.
It's been my experience that with the crosswalks, for example, about 10 years ago, the Camp Long crosswalk was removed. And I believe that the timing, the wait period for the pedestrian has increased. That's evident down by probably Mount St. Vincent. To get across, you push the button and you wait and you wait and you wait. Now, I know the focus is the corridor, but what I would like to request is that you have a look at the West Seattle Trails map that was done by Feet First, because there are some walking trails that go all the way from the Puget Sound over to South Park. That actually they're a lot shorter for walking, and if we're going to reduce trips on 35th, then we should encourage people to get across 35th, as well as reconnect the neighborhood. I mean, there are times when I feel like it's up in Aurora and you just can't get from one side to the other. I don't want the neighborhood to end up like that. I want my kids to be able to get over to Camp Long in a safe, fast fashion. And when you're waiting as a pedestrian for 3 or 4 minutes, it's a long wait. When you're waiting in your car for 3 or 4 minutes, you got a radio, you got heat, it's much better. I also think that if it's, when you go and you push the button, the crosswalks are changed more quickly for the pedestrians, it'll keep drivers more alert.
Yeah.
So it'll reduce their distractions. I know, I drive a car,
Yeah.
and human nature is to think, I got this big long strip, and the chances of pedestrian light changing are gonna be really, really small. Then I'm gonna maybe go a little bit faster, be a little bit more sure, allow myself to be a little bit more distracted. If you push the button and you can walk easily, you get more pedestrians, it's kind of like eyes on the street. You get more action and activity, and I think it's good for the neighborhood.
And we can definitely adjust the signal timing. There's no doubt about that. That's a great suggestion. Let's take one more question from this young lady right here, and then we'll break into the feedback and we can continue this discussion. We have SDOT reps, we have SPD. We're all here to listen. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I have two, actually. First question is that when we walk our dog peak hour, it's kind of scary because we live on 35th too, and we're walking back on 35th from the park. And it almost feels like at peak hours, it's not even safe to walk on the sidewalks. The cars that are distracted will, especially in our area, will come up on the sidewalk and crash.
Yeah, that's actually super common. Just on the Rainier corridor the last few weeks, we've had several buildings hit. So it's definitely something that occurs more often than not.
Another question, because I know that Admiral Way and Bell Ridge and Concord have the middle lane that you guys were talking about. So we're not going to do that. I was wondering, are they working or are they not working? Do they actually reduce speed?
Yeah.
That's
there's no magic bullet that magically makes everything 100% safe. But there's absolutely no doubt that those projects are working. Fauntleroy is an absolute walker's dream after the changes that were made down there. We've seen very little change to travel times on the corridor. The speeds have dropped. High-end speeders, the people who are really the bad guys, right? 90% reduced. That's a significant reduction. And those are the people that generally crash into buildings or crash into poles and die or kill someone else, right? Those are the people we really, really want to get, We want to change that behavior for sure. We have extensive resources on projects like that, and I can point you in the right direction and make sure that you have the opportunity to read some of our before and after studies, so you can see for yourself. The volumes never changed, the travel times, slight increase here and there, or perhaps even more efficient in some locations. But they work. They reduce crashes, they reduce speeds, they make things better for pedestrians. Pardon me?
Was it successful?
Yeah, there was actually in West Seattle, right here in our neighborhood, in fact.
Well, tell us about that.
I have a great story for you. So it happened quite a while ago, and I'm not exactly sure the year. It was either in the 1970s or the 1990s. Maybe a very long time West Seattleite could fill me in on this, because I've only lived in West Seattle since '98. But on California Avenue Southwest, we put that street on a road diet twice, in the 1970s and again in the 1990s. That was the entire stretch of California, from Thistle all the way up to, basically where it curves on down to Harbor and Alki. Now, it worked great for most of the corridor, but in the West Seattle Junction area, Alaska and California, it just didn't, because everybody was going there, because it's a vibrant location. People want to go there. People want to eat there. People want to do whatever, shop. And it just wasn't working well, and we reversed it. And that's the beauty of the road diet, is it's just paint. We're not investing millions of dollars in civil improvements. We're just painting new lines on the street. So if we feel like something's not working or we need to tweak something here or there, we can do it on the cheap. So yeah.
Is Alaska working? It just seems like that's a nightmare coming from 35th into, and correct me if I'm wrong, if that's efficiency, but I just haven't seen it yet, I guess. It seems like that's a huge backup.
The beauty of Alaska is that you've got hundreds of people passing you on buses in the bus lane right there. Every time a rapid ride bus goes by, there's 120 people on that bus that could be in front of you in a car, making you, wait even longer. Now, I've sat in some backups on Alaska, particularly east of Fauntleroy, but I believe, I don't think I've ever sat in traffic outside of the peak hours. And, you know, for 23 hours of the day, I think it works amazingly well. Yes. Yes, sir. Oh, last question, then we're getting into feedback.
Two things, it's amazing how slow the speed limit is in front of Lincoln Park. So people get off the ferry, and they're really held back, and then by the time they hit 35th maybe or whatever, they're ready to blow and go. And also, the Alaska thing, but I know we're not talking about, you can't get in one lane of travel and go all the way through and through the junction. You have to move over, and most people don't think that way. They think, okay, if I'm in the main lane of travel, I can keep going, and then all of a sudden, everybody starts jockeying for position because they figure out that they're not in a lane that they can continue to go forward in. Yeah. And it's really weird.
Well, you know what? There's a really interesting conundrum in traffic, and that is that in confusing situations, we usually have a better safety record. And that's because people are forced to pay attention to the road. So it's really interesting, you know, like down by Endaline Joe's at, you know, Wildwood and Marine View Drive down there, you've got a weird, funky five-way intersection. Very few crashes at that location. It's the same exact thing going on there. Okay, you guys have all been super awesome. John is going to be talking about the south end of the corridor down here. AJ is going to be talking about the central side of the corridor here. I'll be up here talking about the north end. This is the corridor. We've got the lane widths are on here. We've got the streets are labeled. We've got basically a model of the corridor here. I want you to write on here. I want you to tell us how to improve this, and then we'll keep on working forward.